Thanks to Heroes of History for sponsoring today's video. I know it's been a minute. It does feel good to be recording another video, so I hope all has been well with you. I have read around 25 books this year, so I've been pretty productive in the break. I'm thinking of making more philosophical or broader scopes in terms of the content on here and try to sort of delve into what the real purpose history serves in the modern world, because I think people don't really think about that very much. However, I know there's a core group of people who still love the alternate history videos, so if there's any interest, I might post a video or two a month of new alternate history scenarios over on my Patreon, including all the unlisted content that I often get comments about for where the videos went. So if you have the means or desire to support me, help is greatly appreciated. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed the video. In the 19th century, Italy remained divided, but thanks to Napoleon, liberalism had seeped into the peninsula as many began hoping for a unified Italy. With the election of Pope Pius IX in 1846, many nationalists were hopeful for the future, as Pius was a liberal and a nationalist, modernizing the Papal States, granting them a constitution with the liberal Pellegrino Rossi as the prime minister, alongside an assembly, while releasing many political prisoners. Discussions even occurred with the Savoyers over forming an Italian confederation with the Pope at the head, but these amounted to nothing. Sadly, this all came to a halt with the revolutions of 1848, as radicals struck out across Europe. It was particularly awful in Italy, as these revolutionaries were heavily composed of explicitly anti-Catholic Freemasons, little more than tools of Satan, completely ignoring the remissions received from Pius, as godless republics were formed. When the weak fool, King Charles Albert, hoping to capitalize on the chaos, invaded the far mightier Habsburgs, although Pius supported defending the peninsula from foreign aggressors, he absolutely refused to wage war on another Catholic state, pissing off all the liberals and nationalists he had been trying to win over. Then, the harebrained morons went mad, murdering Rossi as he was opening parliament, then taunted his grieving widow before establishing the Roman Republic, forcing Pius to flee. Thankfully, these dastardly schemes were put to rest with the assistance of the French and Austrian troops, who reinstated the Papal States, as Pius completely turned against liberalism and any thoughts of an Italian nation. While sadly you cannot time travel and prevent the abomination that is Italy from ever forming, you can time travel with today's sponsor, Heroes of History. The whole game is based around Einstein and Tesla using time travel to mess with the timeline, so you start off in the Stone Age before leveling your way up in society through to the modern era. I like how it combines the story, city building, hero collecting, and battles all in one. Plus, as a history buff, getting to use some of my favorite people from ages gone past, like Leonidas and Thomas Edison, is just pretty cool. The designs are all good, based on popular looks, and the moves match up well with their known characteristics, with Edison shooting a lightning strike that obliterates his enemies. Heroes of History covers a lot of periods, and I'm only on the Bronze Age so far, but that means I have a long way to go. Hopefully you guys can beat me in a PvP someday. All the leaders, they have over 120 from history and mythology, have unique stats and moves that can be upgraded for very unique combat. Right now, they have a huge new event based on ancient Egypt, so you can step into the Valley of Kings with limited time heroes like Tutankhamun and Nefertiti to defend the timeline and face off against Anubis. Once the event ends on April 28th, you won't ever be able to get these special Egyptian heroes again. To face Anubis, you'll need a lot of resources, so make sure to use my personal link in the description or this QR code on screen to get the Anubis Awakening starter pack. So, if you want to build your own civilization and fight alongside the legends of Egyptian history, make sure to scan the QR code here or hit the link below and jump into Heroes of History today. I hope you enjoyed the game, and thanks again to Heroes of History for sponsoring today's video. Sadly, things turned against the papacy, as Sardinia eventually wooed the half-wit Napoleon III to support their cause in 1859, as the Italians performed to their typical standard, being utterly incompetent, but the French ended up defeating the Austrians, so somehow Italy won the war. Immediately thereafter, Giuseppe Garibaldi, avowed champion of the Masonic cause, who was a sworn adversary of the Holy See, and ultimate aim was the destruction of Christ's Holy Church, rampaged through the peninsula, taking nearly the whole thing, until the French stopped him from taking Rome itself, preserving a much reduced Papal States as the godless Kingdom of Italy was formed. Ugh. A few years later, Italy teamed up with Prussia during the Brothers' War, conquering Venetia. When France went to war with Prussia in 1870, the perfidious Italians took their chance to invade Rome itself, sacrilegiously putting an end to the millennia-old Papal States, fully unifying Italy. And to this day, the country sucks. Now, let's delve into the alternate scenario. Upon his ascension to the papacy, Pius sent letters to Turin, Florence, and Naples, attempting to form an Italian confederation under himself, just as he historically did, winning him much praise from liberals and nationalists alike. However, when his envoys began meeting with these groups, they noted the unabashedly anti-Catholic nature to many of them, as well as the worryingly high number of Freemasons amidst them. Thus, Pius, well aware of the Carbonari and Freemasons, elected to keep the Vatican's political prisoners where they belonged, under the jail. So, when revolutions broke out in 1848, without the huge waves of released whack jobs, the revolts within the Papal States were initially overcome. Undeterred, Garibaldi arrived with his band of brigands and tried to assault the Rock of Peter, marching quite far and even threatening Rome itself before Austrian and French forces arrived, clashing with the Freemasons at the Battle of Passo Correse. Here, Garibaldi was routed by his professional opposition and captured, brought in chains to Rome before being executed alongside a multitude of other radical revolutionaries. Once order had been restored across the peninsula, Pius, shaken by the events, transformed into a staunch conservative, best highlighted by the controversial Mortara affair in 1858, which shocked Europe. This was a real event which I'll describe succinctly. It came out that a Catholic servant had baptized her Jewish employer, the Mortara's son, Edgardo, when he was an infant and nearly died, thinking she would save his soul. When he eventually recovered, the secret remained for another 6 years, though rumors leaked. After 6 years, the Inquisitor of Bologna, Father Pier Gaetano Feletti, eventually confirmed that a valid baptism had taken place. As it was against canon law to have Christians raised by non-Christians, as they would not look after the spiritual needs of the child, he was taken to Rome. Two wildly different accounts of the events after the initial transportation from the pro-Jewish or pro-Catholic side are then laid out. Either the church kidnapped the young child who desperately wanted to return to his family and destroyed the Mortara family in the process, or, after being brought fully into the church, the young Edgardo quickly became a devout and pious Catholic and wanted all Jews to convert. Edgardo did later go on to become a priest and concurred with the papal version of the story in his own writings, but that doesn't necessarily confirm that side's correct. Just know it was a very messy situation, and any information you find is going to be slanted one way or another, like how the servant girl had loose morals, or that Edgardo's father was later convicted of murder after Italy had unified. But anyways, news of the case quickly spread across and caused outrage in Europe and America. Newspapers in Britain called the Papal States backwards, and protests came from Jewish communities everywhere asking for the boy's release. The strongest reaction came from France, where moderate Catholics and liberals alike attacked the decision. Facing the pressure, Napoleon III sent demands for Edgardo to be returned, warning dire consequences that Pius would face if he refused. However, Pius held firm, viewing himself as his spiritual father, and refused to return Edgardo, overseeing his education in Rome, stating, quote, "The great and small wanted to take this child from me, accusing me of being barbaric and merciless. They lament for his parents and do not think that I too am a father. No one sympathizes with me in the midst of painful trials. While in Russia, they violently abduct many of my children, my dear Poles." He concluded, "I had the right and duty to do what I did for this boy, and if it were necessary, I would do it again." Now that you understand what transpired, in this alternate timeline, Pius reacted a bit differently, no longer being as reliant on the French, as the revolts were weaker here. So he began to see Napoleon III as the weak fool that he was, so turned towards the Habsburgs in Austria, who stayed fairly quiet on the affair historically, so here Pius takes it as support. Talks soon formalized for a secret alliance between them against Sardinia, and in essence, France too, alongside a papal-led federation for Italy. This agreement also came about due to the Orsini affair earlier in 1858. On January 14th, Felice Orsini and his accomplices threw bombs at Napoleon III outside the Paris Opera, killing 8 people and wounding many more, though the Emperor and Empress survived. Orsini wanted to punish Napoleon for not doing enough to support Italian independence, especially against Austria, in Lombardy, Venetia. The Emperor was impacted by the event and soon became far more supportive of the Savoyers, as he saw it as a way to direct revolutionary energy outward and increase French power. Austrian intelligence soon found proof of Napoleon's secret agreement with Sardinia, Piedmont, and Plombières in July 1858. There, Napoleon promised to help against Austria in exchange for Savoy and Nice, enabling Savoy to unify the peninsula. Sure enough, in 1859, the Sardinians were ready for round 2, gathering up their men under Alfonso Ferreira La Marmora on the Austrian border to try and bait the Habsburgs into invading them. Austria responded by mobilizing forces under Ferdinand Goulet, demanding the Sardinians to mobilize, but they refused. However, confident that France would aid them no matter what, Sardinian forces crossed on May 15th and fought outposts near Pavia. La Marmora's men took a bridge and claimed they were defending their Italian brethren from the Habsburg oppression. While people in Turin celebrated, Napoleon III did not join, as the Italians were the aggressors, though paid close attention, leaving Sardinia against Goulet's much larger Austrian force with better weapons. Austria fiercely struck back, breaking Sardinian lines at Pavia on May 18th, quickly advancing with strong artillery toward Turin. Once it became clear that the Sardinians were on the back foot, papal troops who were marching north under the pretext of defending Ferrara and Bologna from either force joined the Austrian ranks. After a few more battles, the Sardinians were totally spent, opening up the road to Turin, but not before Napoleon III kicked into gear and scrambled to salvage the situation. Unfortunately, by the time the French arrived, Turin was already taken by the Austro-Papal force. Victor Emmanuel and Cavour fled, blaming Napoleon for not upholding his word, while Pius called the war and the Sardinian plots to unify Italy a Freemasonic machination against the Church, excommunicating the House of Savoy. Unfettered, the French marched on, hoping to at least restore status quo ante bellum. But their clash against the Habsburgs at Chiavenno was inconclusive, costing both sides many lives. Still, they pressured on, fighting again at Casa La Grasso in the bloodiest confrontation of the war, but still, they could not emerge victorious. Napoleon III, who was present for the battles, was horrified by the bloodshed, and recognized the situation was dire as rumors swirled that Prussia sensed weakness and was preparing something in the Rhineland. Thus, Napoleon agreed to the Treaty of Clagenfort. Savoy renounced any claims on Habsburg land south of the Alps, and goals of unifying the peninsula. Its army was drastically reduced, while indemnities were paid to the Habsburg Italian states, who were expanded at her expense. Another buffer was added under the Austrians in the Marquisate of Saluzzo to further prevent retributions. Although they were supposed to align with Sardinia, Napoleon III took the poison chalice from the negotiations to preserve his domestic situation as it had grown restless from the failure, receiving Savoy and Nice from Sardinia, destroying any support he had amongst Italians. But, in turn, this balanced his domestic situation. Shortly thereafter, Pius, supported by Franz Joseph, called Italian leaders to discuss a future Italian federation. In the Apostolic Palace, they formed the Italian Confederation under Pius's leadership, while Ferdinand II of the Two Sicilies took command of its forces. They agreed to build railways throughout Italia, internal free trade, and a common global trade plan. Each member retained its own militaries, though training quickly became standardized on an Austrian model to improve their capabilities, but uniforms remained distinct to honor their various heritages and states. Internal governance was very complex, as forming the Confederation required a number of unique caveats to get all leaders to agree to it, as they formed the only tricameral government in the world. The government naturally sat in Rome, where the newly formed Senate met. Every member's numbers of representatives depended on its population, prestige, and economies, before being elected, and they naturally had to be Catholic too. These representatives formed the lowest house. The second house was composed of the nobility, who were appointed for life directly by the Pope, though various monarchs from the peninsula advised him on who to pick. Atop them stood the clergy. All the laws from the Senate faced review by the College of Cardinals. Only then, after going through this whole rigmarole, did any of these laws then go to the Pope for approval or to be blocked. This way it kept the Confederation's nature very Catholic. Any matter the Church deemed her own, from education to aid, stayed free from the government's control, as did papal links with outside powers. Quanta Cura, a papal encyclical historically given by Pius in December 1864, stood as the guide for the Confederation, rejecting the modernist claim that rules should ignore divine law or treat all beliefs the same. Pius warned such thoughts brought storms of wrong teaching, weakening the Church's sacred effect on nations and rulers. So, here, the state was in many ways the Church. Not sure I really like that as an American, but anyways. Freedom of conscience, called madness leading to ruin, was limited, with secret groups like Freemasons and the Carbonari heavily suppressed. Communism and socialism, those deadly mistakes that claimed family rights came only from civil law, had no place. Parents' teachings duties stayed wholly protected from the state. Heavy work on holy days stayed banned, going against what Pius called false reasons of public trade, so there would actually be many days off compared to other nations like Britain or the US, as many feast days were still prevalent in the Tridentine calendar. Ultimately, with Pius at the head, Italy here was very, very Catholic. Interestingly, it's very likely the First Vatican Council is never called, as Pius is not under the same pressure, and the events precipitating it outside Italy are too different. Thus, the key Catholic doctrinal development of papal infallibility would arrive at a later date, which could have maybe led to a healing in the Great Schism, as there were talks between the papacy and various Orthodox patriarchs to try and reunify the church, as the Ottoman position was greatly weakening by this point. Ultimately, the entire globe would be completely changed by the developments in Italy. As the Habsburgs didn't have to worry too much about their southern flank, Prussia would be far more cautious, as Bismarck wouldn't risk an all-out war, so the German Confederation under the Habsburgs likely remains. In turn, with no Germany, there's very likely no Franco-Prussian War, so the Bonapartes remain in power. This could still lead to a Franco-British Entente, as there were discussions for Louis Napoleon III's son, to wed the youngest daughter of Queen Victoria, but let me know what you think. Back in Italy, the papacy was now even further entrenched as Italian, since he now ran the nation. Thus, Adrian VI remained the last non-Italian pontiff back in 1523, so you would likely never see Popes John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Francis, or Leo. Instead, there would just be Italian bishops or cardinals who were elected to the position. Let me know if you think this is a better or worse world down below, and how you think all this would change Europe and the globe. If you enjoyed the video, click here to see what could have happened if the Holy Roman Empire had conquered France back in the 1500s. Make sure to subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see more videos like this. I'm not sure how often I'll be posting, but appreciate all the support I can get. And don't forget to check out Heroes of History.